So, hi, good morning to all attendees at the 4th Simpósio Internacional de Geografia do Conhecimento e da Inovação. I'm Dr. Janaína Pamplona from the Department of Science, Technology, Policy at Unicamp. And this section will be chaired by Dr. André Campos from the School of Applied Sciences at Unicamp. And the topic of this section is the role of innovation for social inclusion. And it's my greatest pleasure to introduce our guest speakers, Dr. Michiko IIzuka and Dr. Mohamed. And just a few words about Dr. Michiko IIzuka. She's a full professor at the National Graduate Research Institute on Policy Studies, GRIPS, in Tokyo, Japan. She's also affiliated fellow at the United Nations University's Maastricht Economic and Social Research and Training for Innovation and Technology, and Associate Fellow at the Science Policy Research Unit at SPRU, University of Sussex. She did her GPhil in Science Technology Policy from SPRU, University of Sussex. Before that, she got an MPhil in Development Studies from the Institute of Development Studies, IDS, at University of Sussex, and a postgraduate diploma in Environmental Management Policy from Imperial College London. Her areas of research include the topics of inclusive innovation, science, technology, innovation policy for social development goals, the role of innovations in natural resource-based activities, and the role of emerging technologies in developing countries. Professor Michiko has held appointments at the International Development Center of Japan and also at CEPAL, and she has been a consultant to the United Nations Industrial Development Organization and the Swedish Development Agency. Her research has been published in journals such as Energy Policy, Research Policy, and Innovation Development. Today, she will present her paper, Towards Attaining the SDGs, Cases of Disruptive and Inclusive Innovation. So now just a few words about Dr. Zeeda Mohamed. She's an associate professor at the Department of Science and Technology Studies, Faculty of Science, University of Malaya, since 2009, where she teaches and supervises both undergraduate and postgraduate courses that relates the scientific field of environmental sciences with policy management and governance of science, technology, and innovation. Dr. Zeeda's background is in ecology. She then did a master's degree in environmental management and policy at Lund University, Sweden, and the PhD in science technology policies from SPRU, University of Sussex, United Kingdom. Her research interests included sustainability transitions, education for sustainable development, participatory watershed management, and more recently, place-based citizen science. She has been a consultant to the Malaysian government, and her research has been funded by the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, Malaysian Ministry for Education, International Development Research Center, and Unilever. Her research has been published in journals such as Energy Policy, Análise da Academia Brasileira de Ciências, and Sustainability Science. Today, she will present her paper, Public Policy Interventions for Grassroots Innovations. Are we getting it right? So last but not least, I would like to say that I'm really happy that this is a SPRU alumni panel, and we've known each other for almost 20 years now, and I couldn't be happier than having the two of us here with us today. And I thank you in advance for your time and your presence here today. And so now I'd like to give André, pass the floor to André, because he's the chair of the session and he's going to organize it. So I wish you all good presentations and a great debate afterwards. So bye-bye for now. I'll be here later.
Good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I am Dr. André Campos from Unicamp State. Thank you very much, Janaína. So now we will have the talks of Dr. Michiko IIzuka first, for about 20 minutes, and then the talk of Dr. Zeeda Mohamed for another 20 minutes. If you want to extend a little bit longer your talks, that's absolutely fine. We have plenty of time. We planned the session to last for about 1 hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours. So that gives us plenty of time to hear you, and then also to have a debate. After both of your presentations, we will open the floor to the attendees for debate. So we will take questions from the public. I just want to remind the public that you can post your questions on YouTube, and we'll be able to see them and read them to our guests this morning. I'm sorry. And it's also absolutely fine if you present your questions and pose your questions in Portuguese, and we translate those to our guests here. So there's no problem with that. So as I mentioned, we will start with you, Dr. Michiko IIzuka. So you have about 20 minutes, as I said. I guess myself and Zeeda will get out of the screen now, and it will be just yourself, and you'll be able to present your slides. So I see you in a bit.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Janaina, for kind introduction, and thank you very much, André, for very good overarching kind of description about the seminar. Okay, can you show my slides, please? Do you see my slides? Oh, great. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Michiko IIzuka. I'm a professor at National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies. And today, this is a great honor to be invited to this panel of a very interesting subject. And I am sure that though I cannot see you all, I'm sure that you are all a very distinguished audience. And today I will talk about inclusive innovation. At the same time, I will focus more on the private sector, its role in SDG, especially the startups. Next, please. We are all talking about the transformation towards SDGs and then how it is possible to do so. And transformative innovation typically involves setting up big goals like SDGs, like climate change in 2050. And this is a kind of pressure to creating a big pressure to change in a significant way. And this would require a kind of fundamental transformation in socio-technical systems, as Short, Stemula, and Mazzucato says. But it is also true that the systemic change is a bit difficult to obtain. And intervention is very much needed because institutions, as it is, are going to be inertia. I mean, you don't want to change. The institution try to continue as it is, and then the vested interests are there for those big firms or individuals who are in the system, and therefore they have a less incentive to change. And besides that, the individual like us would be so embedded in routine and habit, and sometimes that the needed change are not being recognized well to articulate in a clear way, so that the policy intervention would be needed. At the same time, there are also studies say that the current policy intervention is only encouraging the incremental change and not really guiding to drastic change that is required for us to attain the big mission or big challenge like SDGs. Next, please. Yet we see some changes taking place, and that's the focus of my talk. And you see the two photos on the left-hand side. You have an airplane. This is a drone which delivers blood in the Rwanda, and the other one on the right-hand side is M-Pesa, which is a mobile phone kind of financial inclusion or financial transfer mechanism via a mobile phone. And these are employing a new technology, accompanying new digital transformation, and adapting to the new business model. And these are also providing the fundamental service that are needed, very much needed to the people, but then these are not served by the kind of conventional businesses. So in a way, it is inclusive, but yet it is also disruptive. And these are taking place. Next, please. And this, okay, so what are the driving force and what are the, in a context taking place and the changes taking place? And I mean, although that we don't notice, there are several kind of signals, individual signals that are taking place as a change. One is that we often hear about social entrepreneurs or purposeful business actors. And they are the ones that are trying to address the social challenges, and making them as a business. And we do see a lot of theoretical discussion or the conceptual discussion by Porter and Kramer in creating shared values. Or there are also the talk in among the business roundtable in US in 2019, talking about that now is a moment to pay attention to the stakeholder rather than shareholder. So there is sort of like a shift towards social-oriented business in the business sector. And this actually is kind of fueled by the presence of new type of financial resources. This here is ESG finances, and which has grown to become a US $30 trillion in 2019. And there's also another type of kind of ESG finances, what it is called social impact fund. This is a fund or the investment kind of fund that finances the project that sees that has financial and social returns. And this also had grown to become US $715 billion in 2019. And besides, there is also a type of crowdfunding where individual in a small amount can be able to either donate or advance purchase certain, in support of certain project. So, I mean, we see a lot of kind of this new type of financial resources appearing. And another thing that is also recognizable is a new mechanism of sharing knowledge. We do see a Creative Commons licenses or a copyleft, open and free source movement, patent pool, and maker spaces and fab labs. And these are what they are doing is that we all know that knowledge is important, part of the innovation, but they are doing the part of diffusion of knowledge and how the knowledge can be shared among many actors. And fourthly, what I see is the use of soft laws instead of regulation, like really hard regulation, so law-abiding regulation, like guideline, stewardship, and standard. And this also connect back to the earlier point about emerging purposeful business actors, because some of the kind of soft laws, like principle of responsible investment or task force on climate-related financial disclosures, these are the things that nowadays private sector needs to comply with. And these also forces them to certain actions that are more socially oriented. And this is also a new type of regulation that are very interesting because it goes beyond the national boundary. So in the internationally active firms are very much need to comply with these soft laws. And lastly, I mean, within emerging technology, there is an accompanying business models, peer-to-peer sharing or decentralized small lot production, off and on power generations, or e-commerce, financial inclusion via mobile, and dynamic pricing. These are all kind of interesting business models that are emerging. So what the entrepreneur can do is to combine these things in configuration, in different configuration, and disrupt the status quo of socio-technical kind of systems. And these are also can be oriented towards social means. Next, please. And if I were to go into a little bit on the literature, what I would like to emphasize here is that, okay, we are talking about, I mean, emerging technologies. But emerging technologies, according to Law's definition, is uncertain. It has a potential, but it's uncertain. And it's also changing rapidly. But in order for the emerging technology to have an impact, it also has to come with an accompanying complementarities, and that bases upon the new technology, but uses that technology to create new impact. So here, like if I say that, for instance, emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, the enabling technology is kind of like a smartphone, where you use the smartphone, but you use the smartphone for other things, because that you have also the complementary tools or complementary models like app or like services that are run on the smartphone, so that the enabling technology actually enhances possibility of user and adapt to other areas. And what technological change brings about is a first development of complementarity technology. And it is also then developed into the more the general purpose technology, which becomes a kind of like an invasive, pervasive into various different sectors, and it would also create a huge change. So what it tried to sort of demonstrate is that it requires a kind of a more actors and an ecosystem surrounding the technology. And these are also kind of equipped with finance, human capitals, and technologies, and access to market and networks. So these are going to be kind of necessary. This is one of the concepts that I use. Next, please. And the second concept that I use is a disruptive innovation. I mean, I'm sure that this audience would probably know very well about Christensen's contribution in this concept, that they create alternative market, firm and products and value networks that displaces existing models as through following the providing services in more accessible form and business model that can scale up, or using unconventional financial resources, and using market creation have an inclusive impact. So what I'm trying to say is that disruptive innovation is not the new technology, but is actually trying to serve a new market and create a new market. And it would have an inclusive impact, although that this is disruptive. It would have an inclusive impact because that it would eventually create employment, create a profit, and also a new opportunity for social transformation. So it could eventually can bring about the prosperity, as his latest book was saying, that the prosperity paradox. Next, please. And the third concept that I touch upon is an inclusive innovation. Now, inclusive innovation is a little bit difficult concept because a different type of concept exists that addresses inclusivity. Innovation for base of pyramid, grassroots innovation, frugal innovation, social innovation, or inclusive innovation, and user-led innovation, free innovation. These addresses various types of inclusivity. And I think the next slide, please. Yeah, and Hicks and Foster sort of kind of categorized the different levels of inclusivity, starting from the presence of intention to include, and include in consumption like a buyer, inclusion as an impact, or inclusion as a process, and the inclusion in reconfiguration of structure, and inclusion in consciousness and disclosure. And you would notice that in going through from the level 1 to 5, it is also possible to see that within inclusive innovation, you have a disruption in level 5 and 6 when you are going to disrupt and reconfigure the existing structure, and inclusion in the mindset or the consciousness in disclosure. So I see that these two concepts are quite like two sides of the one coin. Next, please. So my then conceptual framework is more like a disruptive and inclusive innovation, which tends to try to bring about a new market, at the same time create a new value. And that is the kind of concept, and also that is the cases that I try to look at. So those cases that bring about a creation of value and inclusivity. And when you look at the innovation ecosystem would try to create and also capture the value. Next, please. And what I have done is that because this is exploratory studies, so I used the case study methodology, and I looked at 3 cases. Well, I looked at more cases, but I think here I compared the 3 cases of financial related activities. One is called East Venture, which is a venture capital active in Indonesia and in Japan, but mainly in Indonesia nowadays. And then second case is the Samurai Incubate Africa, which is incubation and venture capital, and it's active in Japan. But then I think that the one that I looked at is active in Africa: Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Uganda, Rwanda, and Ghana. And the third one is Avishkar Capital, which is a social impact investment, and this is active in India. And they are also active in other parts of the South Asia, as well as in Africa, but the ones that I looked at is in a case in India. What I used is interview with the CEO and also the secondary sources that are available to try to understand what are the kind of mechanisms that they have. Next, please. So I briefly explain about the case. One is East Venture, and East Venture is quite a successful case because it already has 2 unicorns in 10 years after they have started to do the business. And they are interesting in a way that they do form a sort of group of firms that group of firms that they have invested. And just to show the example, for instance, one of the invested company or the business is called Warung Pintar, and this is the digital kiosk. And how it started is that they had a very small kiosk in front of their headquarters. And this was owned by a very old lady. And then one day that the owner thought that maybe he should actually help this lady in doing her business better. So they have provided the business, the digital devices to her kiosk, so that her kiosk can attract the Gojek motorbike drivers in Indonesia, and which had actually was successful, and they had she had a huge increase in profit margin within a few months. And then the owner saw this as a potential market niche, as an investment. So they have expanded this digital kiosk to various areas, and in 3 years they had established already like 2,000 kiosks. And now I think it's more, because they had already integrated this kiosk into formal kind of chains of retails, buying up other firms. And now there are like quite a lot of these type of kiosks in Indonesia. But next, please. But what is quite interesting in their model is not just that success, the individual success, but connecting and supporting other invested businesses side by side to capture the value. It's not only creating the value in one, but by supporting other services. For instance, that on the left-hand side, you have a Kudo, and the Kudo is another digital business which does on and offline financial services. So that what they do is that they have a device and they put the device into a small shop in a rural area, or it could be also in a warung pintar. And what they do is that they could provide the connectivity or the person who do not have a financial, a bank account, to pay digitally through that mechanism. They would provide you with one account to that would be payable to the e-commerce, for instance. And the connection actually made possible for many people to use e-commerce, and that they are also placed in the warung pintar. And another service that they are doing is a smart warehouse, where they have connected the warehouses in various places in Indonesia, because Indonesia is a huge country within various islands, and the logistic has been critical. And what they have done is they identified a warehouse that they connected digitally, so that the logistic people who can be stopping by and get a drink or at the warung pintar to check where they can go to store their things. So by connecting these in horizontally, they were able to capture the value. Next, please. I mean, similar story can be told in the Samurai Incubate. This is also another venture capital, and they're active in Africa. And what they have invested is this M-Post, because in Kenya you do not have, I think that the individual house do not have address, so they use the PO box at the postal office. But the postal office is very scarcely located, so that the people tend to lose mail or not to get mail. And what they have done is that they connected this service to the mobile phone, so that they get the notice when they got the mail, and the people can go and get it. Or sometimes that they can also ask for the delivery service. And you can probably see it very small at the right hand side. You see this how it increased the number of users. But next, please. But what also interesting about this model is a value chain. The Samurai Incubate also look at as a value chain, because in order for them to have a complete, maybe the e-commerce success, they would have to have manufacturing, advertisement, sales, order, payment, logistic, and delivery service and address, like M-Post. So M-Post is the one part of whole value chain, and they are also establishing value creation, but at the same time value capturing through combining other services. Next, please. Avishkar Capital is a little bit different from these two, but then in a different way. They're in India, and they do impact investment, and they do this sort of finance project that are under these categories: impact everyone, inclusive, require more than just funding. And the third is a require solution that shift paradigm. So it's very much disruptive and inclusive. And they had been also quite successful and pioneering in terms of social impact fund. And what they did, invest in the project like NEPRA, which is the India's first separating, a solid waste management plant with a separation. Because before that, all the solid waste had not been separated, so that in India they had a huge quantity of solid waste in the heaps. And what this firm, the NEPRA, which is the one that invested by Avishkar, did was to change that scenario. Next, please. Here I can go to YouTube just to show what sort of company the NEPRA is. This is a plant that they have invested. I don't know whether And everybody is working, and these are the workers. And this is the CEO. And what they do is that they locate the waste in various places in the city, and then they have an app, and then the people who have the garbage, they can go and collect. And then this is a waste picker, and they also included them as a part of chain, and they have facial recognition like this one to see who they are and how much the waste they have collected, and then they wait and they do fair business with them. And this is a woman manager who is working in the plant, and they are, because they are successful, so they have had a success in one place, so they are trying to expand to all over the India. I think that's the very short video, but you can stop here. Thank you very much. So this is a type of activity that they invest, and the model of Avishkar is a little bit different from their other, because the Avishkar Capital is on the left hand side, and they have another, they have kind of group of different type of financial institutions within the group. Ashib is a specialized IT-based lender to small and medium scale enterprises. And Arohan is a microfinance. So what they can do is that they can really cater the customer from US 100, the loan that they require from US $100 to US 10 million US dollars. They have established a whole chain of finances, and the IntelliCap is a consultancy research fund, and this SunCap Forum is a forum in which that they can attract and communicate with the institutional investors so that they can invest in Avishkar Capital, or they can also interact with the local actors. So they, in a way, they also created the ecosystem, but in a different way as the others. Next, please. Yeah, then there's an additional story which sort of links to a little bit of policy, and going back to the East Venture, the first example that I have mentioned. East Venture is a venture capital active in Indonesia, and now they started to work together with the government. And this also started with the COVID, that they needed the COVID test kits, and they wanted to have it quickly. And what they have done is that the government asked East Venture to coordinate the whole activity. And East Venture had several firms within their invested companies. One is Nusantic, which is a genomic expert, collaborated with the government lab to develop the kit. And there is another one that they also had, CoinWorks, which is a crowdfunding company. And this had provided accountability because they time-stamped the donation that have received, or the donation or investment they received. And ID and Media is an advertisement company under their roof, also ensured transparency by providing time-stamping the donation that received. And at the end, I mean, they were able to create at the end, the government-owned pharmaceutical company Biopharma produced 100,000 kits in June 2020, but it started, I think, in May. So in very short period of time, they are able to gather together all the capability and materialize the activity. Next, please. I think you can see that this is a kit that they have developed. And next, I think, yes, and you can see that this is a kind of like a copy of the side of the box that these kits are included, test kits are included, and they all mention who had been contributing to developing these test kits. Next, please. So, I mean, what can be the takeaway from the case is that I think that all these cases sort of points to the social needs actually can be a good starting point for transformation for startup. And it can also be a good business seed because there is a need. There is a huge need that are under catered for. And at the same time, it's also true that it's not just one single business, but it would require to build an ecosystem to have not only the value creation, but the value capture, to have a more sustainable model. And and they would have complementary activities, making a needed infrastructure, which are sometimes lacking in developing country context. So I think their strategy of creating the ecosystem is one way of trying to complement the lacking or the gaps in the system on the infrastructure in that ground where they are operating. But at the same time, we see at the end that these initiatives are actually kind of nurturing the next steps of the new collaboration with the government, where they also see the startup as a one way of disrupting their way of doing things, and also at trying to cater to the needs of the citizens. Next, please. So I think that if I were to end with an open question to facilitate the discussion, would be how to support this new form of collaboration. I think this is a new way of thinking about the policy and how to collaborate actively with the private sector so that we can use their capability to do or cater to the population that are needed. And we do have various interesting emerging concepts like regulatory sandbox or the toolbox or policy tools, open science or citizen science, the way to procure knowledge, so I think it is also like a discussion to be considered in what kind of collaboration, what kind of a policy that the state can be able to implement, and what sort of role the civil society or the citizens movement can be able to support or to participate in the whole thing. So I think this is my presentation, and thank you very much for your attention. Oh, thank you. And this is the paper that Janaina kindly introduced at the beginning. But thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Michiko IIzuka, for your talk. It's I can say at the same time fantastic and very brilliant. It gives us a lot of hope, I think, and enlightens our morning here in Brazil. In methodological and research terms, I think it has a lot of novelty, and the cases are very imaginative. So just a few immediate reactions I have here. The cases that you presented resonate a lot to us here in Brazil. Just to give you a couple of examples, sanitation is a huge problem in Brazilian cities. We have a very modern legislation, but we've been struggling to implement that. So the case that the small clip that you showed resonates a lot to us. And also the COVID kits that you mentioned. Just to give you a quick data, our university, Unicamp State, one laboratory was able to produce, almost in a small scale batches, 70,000 kits, for our local hospitals at the beginning of the pandemic. And this is the kind of innovation that goes below the radar, that we don't capture it through the usual ways that we do research. So I think your talk will help us to think about those cases. And I think just one final word before I pass the floor to Dr. Zeeda Mohamed. I think collaboration, in a way, for us here in Western Hemisphere, has to do a lot of escaping political extremes, thinking about politics in terms of left and right, and this idea of having, besides left and right, having shared values in society, which, as we've been discussing in preparation to this talk, both of you talk not only about pecuniary values, but you also talk about shared values in society, which I think is extremely important. And we'll come back to that. So now I would like to pass the floor to thank you once again, Professor Michiko Zeeda, for your kind words and your time. And we'll come back in a minute for debate and pass the floor to Dr. Zeeda Mohamed. So we look forward to hearing your case studies, Dr. Zeeda Mohamed. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Let me just share my slides screen here. Can you see my screen? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Andrea, I would like to apologize because I'm not going to just focus on the paper because as I told you, it was led by my co-researcher. So I'm going to go a bit more broader, and I've changed a bit of the title into exploring the role of inclusive grassroots innovation, actually, in enabling sustainability transitions experiences for Malaysia. Is that okay? It's fine, yeah? Okay, so greetings everyone, hola and salam from Malaysia. First of all, I would like to thank you very much to the organizers, especially my colleagues, friends, fellow alumni from SPRU, Janaina and Andrea, for inviting me for this wonderful session on innovation for sustainable inclusion, together with also a good friend, colleague and fellow alumni, Professor Michiko IIzuka. It would be great to be there with you physically, but I guess we just have to make do with the virtual environment. My area of expertise is actually in environmental and sustainability management and policy, with a specific interest on how this can be addressed through SDI interventions. So I did mention to Andrea that social innovation is not really my forte, but I will try to share with you some insights based on three lenses. One, myself as a co-researcher in a research project on grassroots innovation that I have conducted with my colleagues at the university around the year 2019. Second, as an action-oriented researcher in integrated watershed management, which through experiential situations, I ended up having to be involved in inclusive innovation over time on the ground, and third, as my experience as a sustainability science researcher and practitioner. So my presentation will be divided into 4 parts. First is some background on why this topic on inclusive innovation is very important at present. Second is my conceptual framework on how I define inclusive innovation and the related concepts that I will use to operationalize my thinking in this area. Third, then I will describe a bit on how inclusive innovation has been embedded in SDI development within Malaysia at present. And fourth, I will finally present my insights on the topic based on the research that I have done before. The main one would be the research project on grassroots innovation. But if I have time, I would also like to provide some insights or broader insights based on my action-oriented research program in integrated watershed management. Okay, so first on the background. So if we look at the 2020 World Bank report on technological catch-up, there are different types of capabilities that needs to be in place for catching up. And I'm sure most of us in this epistemic community would know this, from building foundational capabilities at the earlier stages of industrialization, termed here as incipient national innovation system, or NIS, to the type of capabilities that is needed to sustain a country at a more advanced level, referring to the more maturing and mature NIS. So I guess countries like Brazil and Malaysia are in stage 2, meaning we are maturing NIS, trying hard to progress towards a more mature NIS. But as we move forward, now at the same time, other than this challenge of catching up, and even, as we deal with the risk of being the risk of having a middle income trap, we have this additional challenge in the next 10 years also on how we can align our catching up goals and strategies with the SDGs in this decade of action for sustainable development and post COP26 on the climate action. And this also means that we are not only having to address, the issue is that we not only having to address local and national goals and concerns, including on catching up, but are also expected to align this with clear global goals as well. So that is a very, very, challenging move ahead. And we must also recognize that although innovation can help us meet the ambitions of SDGs, but it has also accelerated environmental degradation and exacerbated inequalities. So creating new and harder to cross frontiers between those that benefits and those that are excluded. So actually, Michiko and I just attended this Asia League conference, and there were a representative from UNSCAP, and they are also looking into the issue of frontiers of inclusive innovation in Asia Pacific, where there's a need to put inclusion at the heart of technology and innovation policy, and this is quite a trend that we can see globally. So for this presentation, as I mentioned, I will provide my insights based on the work and exposure that I have done on two areas. One, on a research project that I was involved in around 2018 and 2019. This is the paper. You can probably find it on Google Scholar, on public policy intervention for rural grassroots innovation in Malaysia, together with two colleagues from University of Malaya. The lead researcher was Dr. Ng Boon Kui from my department, and Dr. Chandran from Department of Development Economics. And secondly, if I have time, I would like to also share insights from my almost 8 years action-oriented translational work on integrated watershed management, where I have been involved in using the university as a living lab and intermediary for urban-rural youth-led grassroots innovation. So we'll see whether we have the time. Andrea, I've actually added a bit more slides. So if I go too long, just let me know. So now let me proceed to my conceptual understanding of inclusive innovation. So I guess from a big picture lens, my entry point has always been through the literature on sustainability transitions. And this was nicely summarized through the 2018 research policy paper by Johan Schott and Ed Steinmüller on the 3 frames for innovation policy, with the argument that the approach for SDI policy has to evolve to be more transformative as we deal with many global societal challenges that we are facing today in terms of the various mega trends, including the pandemic that we have faced in the past 2 years, and in dealing with the global goals that we have collectively agreed in order to achieve planetary health. So there are a number of characteristics of transformative change in the literature, and indeed social and inclusive innovation, as what Michiko has mentioned, is one big part of it. And this is how I operationalize my understanding of transformative innovation. And being more exposed to the sustainability transitions literature, I tend to use the multi-level perspective canvas to understand the process. So if we talk about, transformative SDI policy, first, we need to have a clear directionality towards sustainable societal goals, and indeed the UN SDGs and also inclusive development in some ways are being pushed to all nations towards a similar direction, especially through the 17 SDG goals. But also, you have these global goals, but also the challenge for policymakers is how do we localize these SDGs to our context. But this is not enough. In order to operationalize the policy, we need to develop transition arenas to support diversity and opening up for alternative pathways towards sustainability, as we are not certain of how best we should move forward. The process is messy, and it's really about combining both structured knowledge, which, you know, science and technology is really, you know, that form of kind of knowledge, and also learning by doing. And this can only be done through experimentation, which must be done inclusively through socially oriented innovation. So these experiments, if there's a good potential to achieve societal goals, for example, the examples that has been given by Michiko just now, in terms of, you know, the various social innovation that has been funded or has been driven by the private sector, probably now need to be scaled up strategically through transitions or strategic niche management until it is able to challenge the mainstream regime to be more sustainable. And this niche management can only be done to the policy actors, by the policy actors involved, if they have the capabilities in anticipation, adaptability, and reflexivity, participation and co-creation. That is very important. Now we look that there's a lot of policy strategies that actually promote participation and co-creation. There's also a call to actually combine science and engineering with social sciences and humanities. Andrea was talking about shared values just now, and that is really about how do we want to combine STI with social sciences and humanities, because when you talk about shared values, and especially local shared values, there's a lot of role in terms of understanding, you know, culture and, you know, local knowledge in order to make that happen. And then, as Michiko also mentioned about, you know, there is a need for new institutions because we are dealing with, you know, new institutional arrangement here when we talk about, you know, these new niches and also different policy mixes. So one category of this social innovation experiment is what is regarded as grassroots innovation in leading towards more inclusive, sustainable pathways. And this is the focus of my presentation today. So what is a grassroots innovation? One of the leading researchers in the field, Adrian Smith and, you know, his group, defines grassroots innovation as a community solution for sustainability. So innovative, it is a type of innovation where innovative networks of activists and organizations, be it, you know, it could be innovators, individual innovators, together with farmers, academicians, policymakers, entrepreneurs, NGOs, that together lead bottom-up solutions for sustainable development that respond to the local situation and the interests and values of the communities involved. This is really very much about, you know, addressing place-based or locally appropriate innovation, seeking to practice deeper alternative forms of sustainable development. So the initiative involved committed activists from various backgrounds who often seek to experiment with social and inclusive forms of innovations. And as what Michiko mentioned just now, there's so many terminologies or concepts at the moment. There's appropriate technologies, frugal technologies, pro-poor innovation, technologies for social inclusion, which I have read is quite popular in Latin America. But in my field, we are really, really interested in terms of not only this inclusive innovation, but also looking at how it can also lead to sustainable technologies and green or eco technologies or innovation. And also grassroots innovators frequently seek to create new social institutions and systems of provision based upon different values to those of the mainstream, because it's, you know, it derived from a grassroots, you know, value. But the issue about STI policy in terms of grassroots innovation, definitely, you know, people really like the idea. It can definitely offer promising new ideas and practices that are more inclusive, but often these grassroots innovations struggle to scale up and spread beyond small niches. So I'm going to proceed now with a bit of overview on how STI policy and grassroots innovation has been dealt with in the Malaysian policy context. Now, so just for those who are not familiar with Malaysia, Malaysia is a country in Southeast Asia. It is a federal constitutional monarchy consisting of 13 states and 3 federal territories. We are quite small compared to Brazil. The land size of Brazil is 26 times bigger than Malaysia. And or in another way of looking at it is that Malaysia is 4% of the size of Brazil. So we're quite small. So, in terms of, learning from each other, I guess we have to put that in context. We achieved our independence from Britain in 1957. And since then, we have grown into an industrializing market economy, ranked 3rd largest in Southeast Asia and 33rd largest in the world. But like Brazil, we are also a very multi-ethnic and multicultural country. So over time, Malaysia has evolved from an agriculture-based economy and manufacturing-based economy, and now the country considers itself as an innovation-led based economy, moving towards a humanizing knowledge economy, considering that the emphasis on the SDG in our current development policy is, quite strong at the moment. And indeed, Malaysia, like many countries, are still experimenting with this process of integrating sustainable development in SDI policy. But similar to Brazil, Andrea was talking about, the issue of political instability and, volatility. So in the past few years, especially the situation in Malaysia has become quite volatile. We have had a change of government, the Pakatan Harapan in 2018, after having the same government, the Barisan Nasional, for about 6 decades since independence, and more recently in mid-2020 we had another change of government to Perikatan Nasional. So the policy implementation has been quite volatile, but we are seeing some significant progress, albeit these political challenges. So in terms of policy, the most overarching policy for sustainable and inclusive development would be the Shared Prosperity Vision 2030, developed by the country's Economic Planning Unit that is responsible for Malaysia's overall economic development. SDG is explicitly mentioned, and inclusive development is a core pillar. So this provides a general direction of the government in charting the development philosophy and principles of the country, which other sectoral policies, including SDI policies, has to abide to. Then Malaysia has the 5 years development plan, which is the medium term planning covering 5 years based upon the long-term policy vision. And again, the SDG has been explicitly and systematically incorporated in the development plans and its budget from the 11th Malaysian Plan and now into the 12th Malaysian Plan. This then has a clear implication to the design of the new National Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy, starting from this year to 2030, with its specific mentioning of sustainability and inclusivity in the vision and mission of the policy, with emphasis on SDI contributing to the economy through quadruple helix collaboration consisting of government, industry, academic, and society. So the specific strategy and action plan on inclusive innovation would be under Trust 2 here, on the policy on technology development via research development, commercialization, and innovation. So basically how it is incorporated is specifically under strategy F of Trust 6, which is spelled out that there is a need to drive social innovation for the benefits for marginalized and underprivileged communities by strengthening social innovation and social impact investment. The action plan begins with a smart partnership mainly driven by government incentive. That is what they propose Malaysia would focus on until 2022, moving towards an increase in private or corporate funded social innovation up until 2025. I think this is what we can learn a lot from the case studies and also the paper by Michiko just now. And finally, the vision by 2030 is to really gain real benefits that is felt by an increasing number of marginalized and underprivileged communities. So what I'm trying to say here, at least in the SDI policy, it is explicitly mentioned or recognized, but how it is being implemented, that is, something that we have yet to see. But Malaysia do have a lead line agency for this effort, especially in the context of grassroots innovation. We have the Yayasan Inovasi Malaysia, or YIM, translated as the Malaysian Innovation Foundation. So under YIM, we do have 3 main activities: promoting grassroots innovation, enabling grassroots innovation by development programs, and also providing funding for grassroots innovation projects. You can look at their website to see the details, but really, after listening to Michiko, I would really like to see how the corporate sector is playing a role in terms of funding, these grassroots initiatives. But it is important to note that YIM specializes in grassroots innovation, but it works closely with another line agency under the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, which is the Malaysian Global Innovation and Creativity Center, which is MAGIC, if these grassroots innovators decided to graduate into a social enterprise. But I must say, being in the environmental sustainability arena, grassroots innovation can actually happen under the purview of other ministries as well. For instance, in the area of green innovation, this I have seen being coordinated by the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, and Ministry of Education without any connection to YIM or MAGIC. So formal pronouncements of the policy does not really reflect the real picture. So actual policy support, I think, can be more dynamic and messier. And really, in my experience, it really depends on the ability, competency, and drive of the actors involved in different sectors. And the more entrepreneurial these actors are, the more able they are in, finding policy opportunity to advance their cause, including in community-based innovation. And I've seen that quite significant in terms of the water transformation agenda in the country compared to other sectors. So now I will provide some insights on the potential grassroots innovation in SDI policy from my work on rural grassroots innovation. Andrea, how long do I have? Have I talked that long? Are you there?
Zeeda, can you hear me?
Yes.
You've talked for 20 minutes. You can carry on for another 10, 20 minutes. It's fine.
Oh, really? Okay. I thought I've talked too long. Okay, right.
As I'm chairing the session, it's fine, if you carry on. We are learning a lot from you.
Okay, thank you. So now we are going to the empirical findings and insights, as I told you, and I'm going to use two areas of research that to provide my insight. One is on the rural grassroots innovation. So this is based on the work that I've done with my colleagues in on rural grassroots innovation. In this project, our definition of grassroots innovation is a bit more specific than what has been defined group by Adrian Smith, in the way that we are focusing on rural grassroots innovation. So these are grassroots innovation that emerge from the knowledge, experience, and skills embedded in communities and individuals, and are often equated with innovation in rural environment for solving problems within a small community. So it's really focusing on rural environment and small communities that are marginalized. So generally it is based on the social economy rather than the market economy, and are driven by social needs and ideological commitment rather than, the usual profit-seeking drivers. And also, it also relates to more to the concept of frugal innovation. If you're familiar with it, it is a process of reducing the complexity and cost of goods and production, leading to good enough affordable products that meets the needs of resource-constrained consumers, and also involve a symbiotic network of like-minded individuals, innovators, farmers, scholars, academicians, policymakers, entrepreneurs, and non-governmental organization that acknowledges the local traditional knowledge holders and grassroots innovators. So this, really very much, connected, or very closely connected to the honeybee network, idea of grassroots innovation. So in terms of methodology, what we have done in this research is basically a qualitative study on rural GRIs, or grassroots innovators, through expert interview with policymakers, including YIM and other related ministries, and semi-structured and open-ended interviews and field observation on 4 rural community GRIs that was recommended by YIM that fulfills the criteria of the research. So basically the criteria that we use is based on the grassroots innovation being able to fulfill observations on 2 levels of processes. Stage 1, which is at the local level, where grassroots innovators has created value from ideation to prototype and actually able to solve local problems. But not only that, they have also graduated to stage 2 at the level of translocal, where the innovation has not only been implemented locally, but has also been commercialized with some value protection, and the innovation has been used by other communities. That is what we mean by translocal. So this is the scope of the interview, which include one, what are the socio-technical elements that motivate the grassroots innovation? What are the main characteristics of the innovation and sources of knowledge, and what kind of formal and informal institutional supports that are required? And this then leads to a number of policy design questions. And what we have done is we have used 4 case studies of grassroots innovation that has been proposed by YIM that fulfills the criteria of the 2 levels. One on grass cutting machine for pineapple farming, 2 multi-purpose truck for oil palm plantation, 3 on mini hydroelectric dam for rural electrification, and 4 on paddy dispensing machine for paddy plantation. So, oh, why does it become like this? Sorry, yeah. Wait. All right, okay, sorry. Okay, so I think let's get to know the grassroots innovators. Sometimes, you know, we talk about their case studies, but we don't know who they are. So the first case study is a grass cutting machine for pineapple farming. The innovator is Wak Sopa, that's his name. He's a pineapple farmer and retired soldier from a small village in Peninsular Malaysia. His family members are generally farmers and has lived in the village for generations. And what is interesting about this innovator is his family is very supportive of his work, and also his wife is actually his strongest supporter. So, and what he has done is he has invented a simple grass cutting machine with the blade and metal plate of a normal grass cutter, which has been modified to cut grass without damaging pineapple fruits in the plantation. So if you look at the picture number 2 here, so before this, the kind of grass cutting machine that they have used was always, you know, very difficult because it will eventually cut the other pineapple, you know, they want to cut the grass, but they ended up cutting the pineapple as well. So what he has done is he has changed the blade in which that you only cut the grass, right? So this has led to the increased efficiency of grass cutting at the pineapple plantation in his area, which is faster and less laborious compared to the conventional practice of using. And also before this, they use a sickle knife as well. And the sickle knife is also very inefficient. So to date, Wak Sopa has produced 9 other machines for improving the productivity of pineapple plantation in his community. And this has tremendously helped the family of farmers that he is connected with. So picture 3 here shows Wak Sopa's first prototype. And picture 4 here shows the more current model. So you can see how he has progressed from this to this, from this machine to this machine. And he is also, you know, he is a hobbyist. He likes to create various, you know, other projects. So it is his hobby, and he's doing it just for pure pleasure. He doesn't really think about, you know, trying to commercialize his work. What he wants to do, he wants to help people, but you know, the idea of commercializing it in order to help other people is, you know, has been, you know, that Yim has managed to convince him on that, and he is working towards that direction now. So, and if you can see here, this is his invention for his grandchildren. It's a twin bicycle. So you have a lot of these, you know, inventions that he has done in his workshop. And so you know, it's interesting that we have this kind of innovators in the rural areas. So the second case study is Wak Wagiman. He has done an innovation on multi-purpose truck for oil palm plantation. So Wak Wagiman is a small-scale oil palm plantation farmer. He was previously a truck driver, and his family and village members are, you know, are generally farmers as well, especially working in the oil palm plantation. He has no formal education, but somehow he has this ability to be an inventor. So what he has done is he has invented an agricultural harvest transporter made from scrap metals and spare parts from unused vehicles. It has eased and improved transportation of agricultural harvest by smallholders. This has led to an increased efficiency of transporting agricultural harvest, especially oil palm fruits, by smallholders, enabling higher quantity and weight of harvest that can be transported at one time. So if you look at picture number 3, this is the old version. This is his first prototype, and look at how it has improved now. With the current, version of his transporter. But definitely, Wagiman is, much more advanced in the sense that he has been supported by the Innovation Center of one public university, and also he has received a lot of support from the village leader. That the village leader even attended our interview with him. So he has a lot of support in terms of that. And what is interesting is that Wagiman has produced more than 100 units of truck, and some of them have been sold to local farmers and even by commercial buyers. So, so this is his picture explaining how he uses various types of scrap metals as materials to build his truck. He also, shared the story that the Hong handle for his first prototype was made from a part of a broken toy. So how things have moved from that kind of type of invention to the kind of invention that can be commercialized. So that is case study number 2. Case study number 3 is a grassroots innovator by the name of Abdul Hamid. What he has done is he has created a mini hydroelectric dam for rural electrification. He's a villager in a very rural area in Malaysia, where electricity is intermittent. Only provided by a generator in the past. So he has no formal education, but he has some experience working with a logging company in town, and he was one of the, in the past, he was the one responsible to take care of the generator in his village. So he felt that this was a problem. So, using his experience working at the logging company, he took a few years to invent a mini hydro dam for rural electrification by using scrap metals and spare parts of unused vehicles. So it is based on a simple turbine connected to an engine, gearbox, and dynamo, as shown in this picture number 2. So this has enabled 24 hours electrification for his family and several households in the village. It has also provided a cheaper and more reliable way of generating electricity compared to electric generators. There have also been requests for him to replicate his innovation in other localities in the neighboring poor areas in his state of Sabah. So this is his picture showing the pipe installed to control water flow, and this is the picture of the mini hydro dam. Yeah, and and it's a very he's a very quiet man, but he's a very warm person, and we have a nice lunch at his place when we went interviewing. So, and finally, the 4th grassroots innovation is by Mr. Setio on paddy sieving machine for paddy plantation. So Mr. Setio is technically trained as a welder who later became a paddy farmer. So his family are actually generally paddy farmers. So he is from the sector, and he also owns a welding workshop shown in picture 3 here. So he is relatively more economically upward and educated compared to the other innovators. He lives in the village, but his workshop is in the town. So his innovation is a paddy dispensing machine that transformed the paddy dispensing activities in the village from a labor-intensive manual process, as you can see here in picture number 2, into a mechanized one, as shown here in picture number 1. So this has increased the productivity of paddy farming activities in his village by reducing the duration of the paddy dispensing process from 2 weeks to 2 days. So that, there is a huge jump in terms of productivity, and he has sold over 100 units of the machine to nearby districts, and Yim is helping him to sell more. So those are the 4 case studies, and what we have done is we sort of did a categorization or in terms of what are the drivers and motivations, sources of knowledge, formal and informal institutional support and policy concerns, and innovators' reaction for each stage of the grassroots innovation. So I'm not gonna, you can read the paper if you want to look at the details, but what is interesting is that there is an absence that these innovators were able to develop this, their local problem solving innovation, because they have, their own tacit knowledge, and also they have support from their, some actually receive support from their family members and villages, and some does not receive support. So, they do receive challenges over time, but there is an absence of policy instruments that provide support at this initial stage. And that is because it's difficult for government to identify an entry point to the geocultural embedded nature of this stage, particularly due to the lack of collaboration and trust at this stage. But what we can see is it took them a long time to actually tinker with their inventions before they finally get to the point where they can solve problem. And that is where probably a more creative, support can be given in terms of identifying them earlier on. But most of the policy, policy intervention that we observed at the time in 2019, we are not sure whether things have improved now, is that the government has actually is trying to help them in terms of commercialization and intellectual property. But what we see is that innovators have little interest and are skeptical of, intellectual property, because what they feel is that, developing this invention is actually to help the local community, and therefore, having this difficult and complicated process of intellectual property actually, make them sometimes get a bit dispirited, and they sometimes get confused of the process. But they are, very supportive of efforts by the government to give public procurement and funds for plant upscaling, and they are very positive of this type of support. But what I would like to end is with this key insight that the main motivation of most of grassroots innovators is driven by local knowledge and wisdom, with simple attention to providing practical solutions to the daily problems of their family and local communities. So the sometimes even YIM actually use, normal sort of way of looking at innovation in terms of thinking about intellectual property and, normal way of commercialization in order to, upscale their inventions. But probably whether that is the best way, it is still a question. And I somehow get inspired by what Michiko has presented just now. Probably there is a different process to upscale that, the private sector is much more better in terms of, helping this kind of inventors. And some of the good practices that we saw from Malaysia in terms of the GIR policy, that the innovators, yes?
I'm sorry, I know you want to talk about your watershed research.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So just to brief you on time. No, it's fine. I just want to brief you on time.
Okay. All right.
We are about 25 minutes into your presentation. So it's fine.
Okay.
Perhaps you sum up.
Okay, then
and then you have 5 minutes to talk about your own research. What do you think?
Okay, right. Okay, I'll be very quickly. I'll just conclude on this, and I'll go to that very quickly. Yeah. Okay, and then, well, I think, one of the big questions that we look at in terms of the areas of improvement is whether intensive government intervention may result in diluting the dynamic nature and spirit of the rural GRIs, and how far should we formalize and institutionalize the process that has been functioning well informally and only providing support that is needed. And that's the question of, what kind of policy is important. Well, I'll go very quickly in terms of my second empirical insights based on my work on integrated watershed management. So basically what I want to highlight here is that beyond grassroots innovation in the way that we saw in terms of the rural grassroots innovation is that, there is once you look at it from a much more sectoral perspective, based on, the work that I've done in terms of watershed management, there are, additional insights that you can actually gain in understanding about grassroots innovation. So the type of grassroots innovation that I've done in the watershed management work is based on this approach called the Living Lab. It is a user-centered, iterative, open innovation ecosystem, often operating in a place-based sort of context. In my case, in terms of a campus, and then how we actually spread it out in terms of a watershed. And integrating concurrent research and innovation processes within a public-private people partnership. And also looking at how, academics can actually promote grassroots innovation through action-oriented and translational research, where we try to do research at the same time we also create change on the ground. So what I'm trying, I think I would try to make it, fast here. So it's based on research that we have done with Japan on Asian-oriented Japanese researchers on Asian-oriented integrated watershed management. So we have learned a very unique way in terms of looking at watershed management that looks into the interaction between hardware, looking into technological approach with software in terms of sort of institutional managed human processes. But the important innovation that we learned from the Japanese experience was on the hardware, which is the organic and voluntary approach driven by internal motivation based on local values. So what we learned from Japan was a lot about how do you use place-based shared values in terms of landscape appreciation, local tradition, retention of historical memories of human-nature relationship, and citizen movements, including place-based citizen science in it's much more of the humanities sort of perspective together with the software and hardware approaches, and how this actually, improve the science policy community interface. So I'm not going to go, I can't go give examples here, but what I'm trying to say is, what we have done is we have used this approach that we have learned from this Asian-based integrated watershed management in the context of our university, because I have a student, my research assistant, who actually asked this question: how can we talk about integrated watershed management at the national and international level if we are not even addressing the problem in our own backyard? And this is where university, really have to, when we talk about inclusive innovation, we talk about sustainable innovation, we have to see whether we are actually walking the talk as well. So very quickly, what we have done is these two youth advocates has been supported by a number of us academic researchers and also members from the development unit to actually address the issue of pollution of our lake in the campus, and also the rivers that is connected to the main river watershed of our capital city of Kuala Lumpur. And what we have done is actually we managed to revive the varsity lake using the approach that we have learned from our research project, and we managed to bring the lake back after 2 years. And what has happened is that we created a grassroots movement within the campus, because we didn't have any structure at all. In the beginning, we only have the promotion of shared values with the stakeholders. In the beginning, there was no program at all within the campus. And we also have, a different grassroots movement also happening in terms of waste management and also greening and biodiversity. And together, what we have done is we convinced the university. Sorry. So what we have done is we have created the campus sustainability living lab model within the university, creating a new type of research funding that is very different from the normal type of research program where we focus on project target achievement, not focusing on publication, not focusing on patents, but really looking at the impact and how this is contributing to the campus community and also the local community as well. So what has happened is that with the new way of looking at innovation within the university, we were able to upscale the Living Lab in terms of not only looking at the conservation of the water bodies, but we have also looked into the demand side of water management in terms of reducing water consumption and increase efficiency of water use. We managed to create various solutions in the university, and the successful ones we were able to share it to the external community. And it has been an 8 years journey of work. And what we have done now is we now have a youth-led university-linked social enterprise that is connected to Water Warriors, that is being, being led by the founders of Water Warriors. And we have also establish a youth-led community-based social enterprise as well in another river watershed that is connected to our campus in terms of it providing 100% of water supply to the campus. So what I'm trying to say here is that even universities, and what we have done is by working with the youth leaders and them, setting up a social enterprise, we were able to communicate, not only working within the university, but we have the trust. Somehow we have created the shared value in working with other universities in the state where we are located, and also with local communities, NGOs, and civil society. We work closely with them, government agencies, and even private sectors is providing CSR money and funding for the kind of innovation that we are doing. So what I'm trying to say is, rather than looking at just, from STI policy and how we want to promote grassroots innovation, what I've learned from the sustainability or from my environmental kind of work is that from the point of shared values, re-enchanting the community shared value, this does not only refer to the local communities, but also the local stakeholders, the firms, the government agencies, the NGOs towards, in this instance, on the water bodies through the lens of history, tradition, and local culture. Because one of the things that we have forgotten in Malaysia is what is the value of water to us. And once we were able to sort of re-enchant that, they were able to, sort of start to think, okay, what is the value of the water and how do we share it together? And from there, we also have increased, in order to strengthen that, we have increased local knowledge and sense of place to popularization of forgotten spaces, gotong royong in terms of communal cleanup, place-based citizen science and education awareness programs. And this then lead to what we call the hardware advocacy, where we use shared values to create a reflective and more dynamic science policy and community interface and discussion grounded by shared values and why we appreciate our watershed. And this has led to various creative grassroots innovation through multi-stakeholder, collaboration. So this is another way of seeing it. Before this, we look at, how STI policy can actually promote grassroots innovation. But I also see that, once we have a better understanding of environmental appreciation and sustainable development, we are able to create the creativity where grassroots innovation can actually happen. So I'm sorry if, I'm going everywhere here, but I'm at the end of my presentation. Obrigado, thank you, and terima kasih. And I just want to highlight that UNSCAP is actually, has invited, is actually organizing the online policy forum on frontiers of inclusive innovation. I've been invited for that, but I think if any one of you are interested in this, you can actually contact them and be included in this forum, because I think it's very useful for this discussion. Thank you so much, and sorry, Andrea, for taking such a long time.
No, you don't need to apologize at all. It has been fantastic and very rich presentations. Thank you both. I'll do a couple of very quick comments, and then we move on to the public. I just want to say a few words on Michiko's presentation. I think the very idea of resource and value combination, or resources and values combination, for instance, between Indonesia and in Japan, resonates strongly in terms of the complementarities that we could unlock here in Brazil between local investors and investors in the global north, that we have, you know, a direct connection in cultural terms and in demographic terms, for instance, in the United States or in Western Europe, in Italy, for instance. Also, your case on India and Indonesia resonates very strongly to us. Of course, we have commonalities in relation to these countries in terms of size of population and income, for instance. And I was impressed with the long-term nature of the investments that you mentioned, and of course, the extent of their social impact. In relation to Zeeda's work, I could talk about, of course, a strong state-led orientation in various different ways over several decades. We could talk also about, as I mentioned, shared values, and not only about pecuniary values, which I think is very relevant for us here in Brazil, particularly. And of course, the attention to water resources from the perspective of local action, which I'm sure will be the subject of another presentation, Zeeda, because we had a lot to talk about that, but we ran out of time today. And perhaps to sum up, you show that other actors beyond the state and the usual actors in systems of innovation are very much relevant, like private kind of venture capitalists, local farmers, micro businesses, state agencies such as the ones that Zeeda mentioned, EM and MAGIC, which I loved the acronym MAGIC. And in your paper, at some point, you say that even the police force was involved in the truck design. But I don't want to carry on longer than this. I will give the floor to the public. So we have a few questions, I understand. So perhaps we will take questions from the public or from Professor Ana Cristina. I'm not sure. What will you be doing right now? Should we go to the public or to Professor Ana Cristina? So if you can bear with us. So yeah, Professor Ana Cristina will pose a question to you. Ana, your mic is not working.
I'm sorry. It's a real pleasure for us to listen to your both presentations, Professor Michiko and Professor Zeeda. It's a wonderful and wonderful issue we should always be looking at, especially as we live in a country in which poverty in Brazil is such an important issue. Yet, dealing with social needs in order to overcome their problems as an important part of the science and technology policy is still missing in Brazil. Although there are some experiences, but I think we could say that what you found in the Asian and African experiences, Professor Zeeda brought us, as well as in the Malaysian experience, Michiko and Professor Zeeda brought to us, look as much well-rooted let's say, preoccupations with people's lives much more than we see here in Brazil. So you brought us very different experiences, not only from university initiatives, but also the state public policies. We don't see it here as much as you reported us. Regarding the universities, there are several initiatives. One of them is called the National Network of Technological Incubators of Popular Initiatives, ITCP, as we call it, which is a very, very important initiative here in Brazil. But they don't have the same support from the government as you do here, there. And it's a struggle, a permanent struggle between either working on these initiatives or publish or doing IPCs for the professors involved. You see, our post-graduation system values much more publication, much more than initiatives like these. So our academic personnel is always divided regarding these connections. So I think this is one problem for us, which difficult the universities to get closer to the problems people face and support their struggle to find solutions which deserves technology and scientific knowledge. I think this is one problem. But the other problem for us, in my opinion, comes from the issues, unfortunately, Zeeda brought us, related to values, culture, and so on. As long as we had quite a long period of, slavery in Brazil, the large amount of the population who are from slavery descendants or very poor people are not seen as they should be seen by our political and also scientific, or even worse, the private entrepreneurships. So we face this problem, which is cultural, and so it is much more difficult to overcome. But I would like to finish appointing a very interesting initiative, I think, which is the Living Lab of the University of Malaysia. As long as you can bring students and their professors to think of their problems within the campus. And this is a kind of interesting formation for our students. And the problems within the campus could be solved in a way that could bring solutions for other places as well. On the other hand, I point to the takeaway from the cases Michiko brought us, drawing your attention to the question of capturing the value, not only creating value. It is very common among our poor people to create very handicraft solutions for their problems on their own, with no help, support whatsoever. I live in a place where coconut is very common as part of our meals, in a very different sorts of way. Maybe as in Malaysia and other parts of Asia, coconut is quite widespread. So we need to grind coconut to turn it into milk, for instance, and with this milk we cook various types of salted and also sweet meals. And people suffer, I mean, mostly women suffer to grind manually. And once I came to a open fair and found this man doing it mechanically by transforming a former piece of a motor of another instrument he had at home into a grinder. And after that, but it was very, 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 very primitive. But then somebody came and managed to copy the idea and turn it into a very, a much more commerciable, I mean, tradable instrument. And he wasn't able to capture the value he created. So I think this is another important issue, not only the question of collaboration, complementarity, and even the critical aspects of ecosystem. We should also be very preoccupied with the value, capturing the value these poorer communities are able to create. I think these are very important initiatives. I would also just want to say that I thought of the Living Lab not only as a place where we could bridge different areas of knowledge, bringing together different professors, different students, but also bridging the knowledge, this scientific knowledge with the popular, the community knowledge. This connection between university and the community is a very rich source of a different transdisciplinary knowledge we really need to foster. And just to stop, please, I'm sorry I've been talking too much, but your presentations were really inspiring. But I think we could make a very interesting connection with the final remarks of the presentation by Michael Stopper yesterday, as he brought us some to Brazilians. He was talking to us Brazilians, but he brought us some challenges. What to do in this country in which we have the bulk of the population living in a very low income standard. What is the sort of innovation we should be worried about? And you brought us very, very important answers to this question and this challenge Professor Stopper brought us. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Ana Cristina Fernandes. So without further ado, I would like to suggest that we listen the questions that we have to the public, and then you keep those for the future, for your own research, Dr. Zeeda and Professor Michiko, and then you sum up in a few minutes based on those in your presentation. I know it's very late in Tokyo and in Kuala Lumpur, and you have to rest at some point. You can't work 24/7. So yes, let's, Fernando, please, if you could post the questions to them, perhaps I read. So one question was about, I think this question is to Zeeda. What was the geographical proximity between the four the four cases that you analyzed? Perhaps you can give a very short question. Were those in the same region? Were those in mainland and island Malaysia?
Actually, two of the case studies were in Peninsula.
And what's the role of geographical proximity, if there is any?
Okay, right. I guess geographical proximity is important as well, because YIM is, most of the supporting agencies are located in Peninsular Malaysia, and two of the case studies located in Peninsular Malaysia. And the one that is one of it, the one with the mini hydro, is actually located in the Borneo Island, which is the island part of Malaysia. And it's one of the, it's a big state, but it is also quite marginalized in the sense that, most of the resources goes to the Peninsular Malaysia, right? And that's why you have a lot of, the need for rural electrification in the Borneo, in this Borneo area as well. So there's a lot of more, there's, the need for inclusive innovation is actually more towards this state of Sabah and Sarawak, which is located in that island area of Malaysia. So I think that context is important, because much more investment on grassroots innovation should go there rather than in the mainland.
So we have another question on the way. Let's see if it's possible. Again, to Zeeda. Was there some kind of interaction with universities and research centers for the case of social innovation in rural areas that you presented?
Again? Oh, I see. Okay. For the case studies that we had, I think two of them had a very, the one with Wagiman, which is the transporter of the oil palm branch, was actually having a very, very good relationship with a public university innovation center. So what they have done is they help him with, in the beginning, his workshop was very small. And what they have done is they helped him to upgrade his workshop, and also to provide him with additional, competencies as well, and support in terms of, the type of knowledge that he doesn't have, and also in helping him in commercialization as well, together with YIM. So that is why he was able to produce 100 trucks and actually improve his, invention much more. So that is where the role of, other actors is important as well, which probably YIM could not provide. And as you mentioned, Andrea, even the police forces actually help him as well. So he's a very friendly guy. So in one way, he manages to, he has this social capital that he managed to attract and help him in many ways. So people love him. But but there are also, like, the case of the one who did the paddy dispensing machine. He doesn't like to, he can develop his own machine on his own, because he has his own capital, because, he's a bit more, he has more finance compared to the others.
So there is a question coming now, which is for both of you, and perhaps I will pass it to Professor Michiko, which worked in CEPAL in Santiago do Chile, and she knows our context more than Zeeda. What would be the agenda for improving analytical and theorizing efforts to overcome the challenges, I suppose, SDG in your perspective, and whether we should take historical considerations and political formations of our countries into account? Is there a role? Yes. So, Michiko, if you could say a few words on that. I know it's a huge question.
Yes, it is quite a challenging the question, but I think that each individual part has the like the history, and then the culture, as Zeeda's presentation well demonstrated. So the solution lays in the in that social context, and I think SDG sort of creates an overarching goal to everybody, but how to get there and where to get there, and then is ultimately very much depending upon the its social embeddedness that the person are in. So I think these are I think these are important questions to be considered, and maybe even social embeddedness. These are the existing theory would be able to help us give a clue in terms of understanding the current situation, and to find a way to forge ahead, getting towards attaining the SDGs. I'm sorry, I might not be clear in the answering, but that's
that's fine. It's 11 p.m. in Tokyo, so it is understandable. Just to mention that Dr. Rosana Corazza is a colleague from our postgraduate program and from Janaína's department. Yeah, so perhaps we're gonna post. I'm gonna ask a final question, and then all the other questions that are in YouTube, we will mail those to you with the name of the attendees, the public members of the public who asked them. And if you want to post your email in YouTube, we can retrieve your emails, and perhaps you can establish a communication with Zeeda and Michiko. So please, Fernando, if you could quickly show the question. How to intensify society participation to produce innovations that are related to its problems? So is there, in a way, is a background question, a very general question, a how question. How do you intensify societal participation? So perhaps a quick word from both of you, and then we close our session.
So maybe I try to, and this is also a huge question, so it's very difficult to be articulate about the answer. But I think that there are emerging mechanisms in which that the participation but the social participation allows social participation. For instance, that I mentioned about crowdfunding, and that is one way of social participation that allows each individual to become investors in a very small amount or in various different ways. But and there is also another ways for a person to become a generation or the providers of information by citizen science. For instance, you can report some knowledge or something that are happening in a locality to the university or authority in the region, be informative about what could be taking place in the locality. Open science is another way. And of course, there are also like makers places, fab labs. These are the places where you can also share your small inventions or innovations with your colleagues or free of charge. And I think that the terminology that didn't really come up, but it could be also quite useful, is a free innovation by Von Hippel. And that talks about the difference between free innovation and the user-led innovation. And free innovation is the curiosity-led and the pleasure, sort of like free time-led. The people are inventing in the leisure time. That is very much similar to what Zeeda described about the grassroots innovation, because they are not interested in patenting. They're not interested in the diffusing, but they are just as interested in solving the problem and sharing with their community so that the people can deal with the problem. And what Bonhippo talks about this as a problem is that, essentially that this kind of solution needs to be diffused. And then diffusion requires some kind of commercial interest. So there he sees the compatibility with the free innovation, with the user-led innovation, where the user-led innovation have a little bit more commercial orientation to upscale and diffuse. So I think that these combination, that's why that ultimately that we can talk about collaborating with the various different actors with a different interest, and how to combine it is going to be ultimately the skill of the policymakers or skills of the university experts who are in the field and knowing different, the world of like academia or world of practicality. These two worlds in a different also disciplinary field as well. I think that's probably all for me. I probably talked too much.
So one final observation, Zeeda, please.
Yeah, I agree with Michiko. There's a lot of similarities in my perspective as well. But one of the things that from my own work in terms of the Living Lab and also watershed management, I think the issue of shared value is important. How do you articulate? You look at SDGs. How do you localize the SDGs in the lingo of the local context? That makes people understand it much more. And you can only think about innovation if you know how does it translate in your own immediate needs and also your local context as well. So I think this area of shared values people don't always talk about, but I think that is important to push people to create solutions. Second is in terms of, I think what Michiko was saying about ecosystem, innovation ecosystem, is it, Mitch? I think that is very important in terms of supporting this whole process, and dynamic capabilities in terms of people and also on the part of public policy and also the various stakeholders is also very important, because we should be able to see each other's perspective. And I think in the advanced country, they are much more probably trained for that interdisciplinarity and all that. And so that's why they can have very, constructive debates. And I don't know, all this, policy discussion, but I think it's a bit more limited in, at least in the developing country context. Probably in Japan is much more advanced. I'm not sure, Mitch. But, and also, in terms of the role of intermediaries is also very important. Even like universities now is playing, a much more important role as an intermediary, in terms of the work that we are doing, in terms of sustainability science, we have action-oriented research, transdisciplinarity research, and all that, because there's so much of the need to coordinate these different fields together, and universities have to step up to play the role. And Mitch mentioned about citizen science. As I see in advanced countries, citizen science is very popular because people are, in terms of their capacity to understand science is much more higher. And therefore, they were able to participate in citizen science. One of the difficulties in which we are facing when, I'm promoting citizen science in Malaysia is because people don't appreciate science beyond schools or university, beyond, practical usage. So this culture of science is also important in order to promote SDI. So I think that is the, some of the addition that I can give to what Michiko has given. Thank you, André.
Okay. I am sure we all learned a lot from you. So thank you very much, Dr. Zeeda Mohamed. Thank you very much, Professor Michiko IIzuka. And now final words from Professor Ana Cristina and from Dr. Janaína Pamplona.
Can I say? Okay, so just once again, I'd like to thank you for these inspiring, fascinating case studies. And I mentioned at the beginning that it was a SPRU alumni panel, but here we have Sussex alumni. We have 5 Sussex alumni doctors, because Professor Ana Cristina also studied at Sussex when she did her PhD. So I'm very happy to have you here, and I hope we can continue in some sort of collaboration in the future. And thank you very much for your presentations.
Thank you. Thank you.